Welcome everybody back to the Collector Series. Today I have a very special guest, Mr. Carlos Alcazar. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of Canadian wrestling card collectors over the years, but Carlos, this is the first time that you and I are sitting together, and we've just met recently. And believe it or not, we're very close to each other. I'm in Toronto. Carlos is in Mississauga. So for all you people around the world that don't know your Southern Ontario geography, Mississauga is sort of the next city over from Toronto. Going back into the history, it used to be one big town, but
Mhm.
I think it goes like Toronto, Ottawa, Mississauga now in terms of population. So
Yeah.
nice to meet you, brother. And what Carlos brings to us today is he's an avid AEW collector, and the reason for us getting together is to chat about sort of the history of the Upright Deck AEW cards, but more so, we came into contact with each other when Tony and I went to the National this year. We went to the Upper Deck booth, and there was no sign of wrestling cards whatsoever. And we were kind of dismayed about that. The only set that we'd had that came out on the air so far is the flagship, and we'll let you know what we mean when we refer to that. But basically, the 2024 AEW Upper Deck set. And that was it. Now, unbeknownst to us at the time, the Skybox Metal Universe was on the shelves of a lot of distributors, but we weren't aware of it only because there was very little sort of promotion and energy put behind it. Certainly, no one at the booth at the National knew anything about it, which is strange. And even when we went the year before, wrestling wasn't really a focus for Upper Deck at the show. And I know that there's a dude named Billy who's sort of their representative for this kind of product, but he was nowhere to be
Sure.
found. And I don't know if they populate these booths with kids just for the show, but no one had a clue about anything. And we came back and we're like disappointed that, hey, there's no AEW product anywhere in sight and we don't know what's going on. Meanwhile, we were on the verge of another Skybox Metal Universe set, which we'll talk
Mhm.
about in a bit, which is my favorite of all the AEW sets that have come out.
Mhm.
And Carlos was kind enough to reach out to us and say, hey, if you guys need information on AEW, I'm an avid collector of the stuff, and I can fill in some of the holes for you.
Mhm.
And I thought it was weird that there was only the one set, there was no sign of anything else coming out on the year. And so far we've only had the two major AEW releases this year. It's not been the most prolific year for AEW, but you would think that like Tony WrestlingTradingCards.com has been around forever, and he's one of the preeminent sites to go to for this stuff. The Wrestling Card
Mhm.
Price Guide also does a lot of information stuff, and you would think that someone from Upper Deck would reach out to us or be aware of what we do and kind of let us know, hey guys, this is what's happening. But I guess we're sort of on the fringes of that. It has been pointed out to me by other guys in the hobby that hey, we're not part of the larger hobby of baseball, football. We're sort of in our wrestling niche, and a lot of times these bigger manufacturers they don't really, not that they don't know who we are, but we're not on their radar that they're going to reach out and let us know what's going on. So I'm happy to have Carlos here today to talk about his experience with the product, to fill in some holes. We're going to do a sort of walkthrough of the last 5 years of AEW product. So welcome, my friend. Let's start with the obvious question. What got you started into wrestling cards?
So wrestling cards really started a little bit later. And I'll touch on one thing you mentioned though, just before I get into that fully.
Sure.
So you mentioned that there were two. Flagship,
Yep.
the Metal Universe.
And
Now
the
we're not
national.
counting SP Game Used because SP Game Used just came out.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
So
see, he
there,
had
so they're the three that's here so far.
right,
Yeah.
and there was also the National World, or whatever they call it, the National. There's a set called National Worthy, and we've
Mhm.
had those sets. And then, of course, there's the stuff like the online stuff as well. We'll get into that.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'm just sticking to the three main ones. So just for the
Yep.
three main ones, right now we are at three. But I guess it plays to your point though, that even just automatically, just instinctively, as you're going through it, oh, they've only released two. Well, this SP game just came out like a week ago. It's
Right.
brand new, just came out. I've opened a couple boxes of it myself. I've got some
And
of
you
the
know what? I,
cards.
I haven't even checklisted it yet. So
Yeah, for
again,
sure.
and that's, it seems that we'll get back to you in a second about your
Yeah,
history.
sure.
It seems that like Topps gets all the noise, with the
Mhm.
switch over from Panini. We're back with Topps again with the Chrome sets, and they're doing a cross promotional set, and it seems like they're getting the lion's share of energy.
Mhm.
And publicity. And for me, it's like, well, you know what? AEW is still very much a going concern in the wrestling world. The cards are out. There's guys like you that collect it. So let's go back to day one with you. How you got into wrestling, and then
Sure.
what specifically motivated you towards the AEW product?
Sure. So wrestling is easy. That's kind of, I started in 1990, so I'm towards the tail end of the first Hulk Hogan run. That was kind
Right.
of the era.
You're not
I
new to the hobby at
No,
all.
no, not new to wrestling at all. And I've watched it pretty much straight through for the majority of it. I got a little bit bored towards maybe about the era right after CM Punk kind of finished his little run there.
Right.
Realistically, the John Cena era never really inspired me, although I did appreciate him more towards the latter portion of his run. But then starting at like late Hogan era, then into the New Generation era, the Attitude Era, the Ruthless Aggression era. So we're going pretty consistently.
Were
But
you
the reality
collecting?
is,
Were you collecting then, or no?
so not really. I
No.
did pick up a couple of cards. There was the I want to say it was the 98 comic images set. It was like the
Oh,
full bleed photos, those
yeah,
ones.
yeah, yeah.
So I opened packs of that
With the
stuff and
Rock
then
rookie, and of course that
yeah, yeah,
Stone Cold
exactly.
was a sort of preeminent one in that set.
Exactly. And then there was the WCW set in right around 98, 99. There
Yeah,
was that one. I think Tops came out with that one.
yeah, with all
So
the
I opened a
autographs.
little bit of that. Not, but
Right.
wasn't anything too crazy. For the majority of it, I was predominantly collecting sports cards, a little bit of hockey, but I was a baseball collector too. And I've got my couple of players that I collect. So I'm a player collector is kind of the collecting background.
Right.
Wrestling background, pretty consistently since most of that time. But after a while, it's just, if I've seen enough wrestling, it gets a little repetitive because you
Yeah.
can kind of see all the storyline beats that they were going for. It gets a little repetitive. You get a little bored.
Yeah.
So it's almost like watching a movie and then watching somebody do a remake of it. You can appreciate what they're doing for the remake, but you saw the original. So
Yeah.
it's like
Exactly.
so it may not hold up,
Kind of
and
like
there's
that
only
new
so
Running
many
Man,
stories they can
that
tell.
new Running Man that just came out. We checked it out, and like, you know what? The first one I really enjoyed. This one not so
Mhm.
much because it's a retread, kind of a
Yeah,
retread, you know?
yeah, and it's not that they're not trying stuff. That's why I
Yeah,
say
yeah.
I try not to be too harsh on the current product, and that's why I said that'll come into the AW. So I'm going to bleed it into your question. So the thing is, I started to get a little bit bored. It started to get a little repetitive, and it reached the point where once we entered the DVR era, where you can go in and record the shows and everything, I would start to do that.
Right.
And my rule was, if I'm not interested in the segment or I'm not interested in this match, I'll fast forward through it. It was a great time saver. I didn't want to sit there for 2 hours or 3 hours and
Same,
watch the whole
same.
show.
It's background for me. You know,
Yeah.
because I'm into it. I'll DVR or PVR stuff, and it's just, I'll zone in when something catches my eye or
Mhm.
catches my ear. But usually it's like music to me. It's just in the background. I'm listening to hear what's going on.
Exactly. So it reached the point where I would DVR it, and I found myself fast forwarding more and more till it got to the point where I left. I told a buddy of mine a couple of years back. I said, I've gotten to the point where I can watch an entire episode of Monday Night Raw in about 8 minutes.
Really.
And at that point, it's like, well, then what's the point? This. Why bother? Why I'll save 8 more minutes because at that
Yeah.
point it doesn't seem worth my time. The promos didn't compel me, the storylines didn't compel me, the matches didn't compel me. So then AEW shows up, and I'm interested. I'm intrigued. It's something different. At least somebody's going to give it a try, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I
Yeah.
don't compare the two because I don't think it's fair. You've got a company that has 60 years of history
Sure. Of
and a
course.
company that's just turned six, basically.
Yeah.
So it's like it's apples and oranges here.
Sure.
And Tony Khan's vision of what he wants to do is completely different than what WWE is doing. But I appreciated the difference. I appreciated they were trying to do something, and I appreciate that we got different characters that we didn't have already. So even if they didn't all work nearly as well, they weren't as well developed or hashed out, they were different characters. I wasn't just getting the same thing
Same
over and
guys
over
that you've
again
seen
that I
over
was
and
getting.
over.
Yeah. So that was the appeal. So by the time that started to come out, and then a little bit around pandemic period, so Upper Deck gets the license to do the cards, and I'm already a card collector. And again, the WWE product itself doesn't appeal to me. Obviously, they had cards, but I wasn't super interested. But at the same time, then Upper Deck comes out with this, and I'm like, all right, I can get on the ground floor of this thing. I'll get some packs, I get some boxes, and that's what I started doing. 2021, the first flagship release, I started opening boxes of it, and they were way too expensive. The first ones,
Right.
we could have a separate conversation of that. I think that hurt it initially,
Right.
that it were too expensive for what it was. And then every product since, I've opened at least a couple of boxes. One of the products I've opened like a case and a half. So I've definitely opened my fair share of it, but I also collect the singles. And then as a player collector, I selected certain favorites and I started collecting those. And then I went deep down that rabbit hole of doing that.
Did you do the sets? Were you able to put together the complete base sets or any of
For
the?
the early ones I did, I've got quite a number of them. I'll still put some of them together. Realistic though, if I open enough boxes of some of them, I would get the
Right.
set automatically. So
Right.
I
Sure.
so I would set it aside. I've got some boxes where I've got some of those sets. Some of the sets I'm less interested in than others. But
Sure.
like for example, the new SP game use, even though it's a little bit more expensive product, I'll probably do a base set of that. I actually think the base set looks really nice. So and it's 100 cards. It's reasonable enough. So yeah, I'll probably put together a base set of that.
I'm a base set guy, and I try and
Mhm.
do most of the inserts, and I've got probably 80 to 85% of the AEW universe. But do you remember back, Carlos, in 2021, the buzz? Like,
Mhm.
we were real excited for this AEW product.
Mhm.
it was a big deal when it came
Hmm.
out because all of a sudden, like you say, there was an alternative to
Hmm.
just the WWE product, which was Tops, and then it was transitioning soon thereafter to
Hmm.
Panini.
That's
But for
right.
me, it was like this is great, and you know, I was into watching it. I have to say honestly, around the time that Cody left and Punk left, a bit of the wind got taken out of my sails. I still
Hmm.
watch it,
Hmm.
but not as much as WWE
Yeah.
these days. But certainly in the early days, I really dug it. Our buddy Chuck was a huge AEW fan, and
Hmm.
he used to, you know, we couldn't bother him during that Wednesday night 8 to 10
Yeah.
because you know AEW was on. And some of the early pay-per-views, like there was one I remember, I don't know, it was probably in year two, called Forbidden Door, where
Hmm.
they did the cross promotion with the Japanese guys. And the Young Bucks, I think, took on Penta and Phoenix, I believe, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken. That was one of the best
Probably. Yeah.
matches I'd seen in years, you know. So I was quite into the product, but it seemed to me that, you know, I don't want to use the phrase drop the ball, but it seems that each subsequent year Upper Deck loses a bit of steam on the product. And we're going to go back and we're going to go through the years and I'm going to get your comments because you know all the products. But, you know, like I say, this year we only had three. And in 2022, we had one, two, three, four, five. And then we also had the match dated moments and the new arrivals, which were the online stuff. Let's go right back to the beginning, the advent. Now,
Sure.
should we talk about the all in set, the independent with Cody and those guys before we got to the
Yeah.
actual?
I've got some of those as well, so I can talk about it. Sure.
Yeah, well, that was sort of the seed that there was a market for a second promotion to
Hmm.
to come together, and they did that one show that had something like 15,000 people come out and see it, and it was quite clear. And then, of course, they did the deal with the cons, so that the backing and the financial end of it was there, and
Hmm.
away we went. The first set obviously was the 2021 Upper Deck All Elite, and
Hmm.
we refer to that as flagship. So every year there's subsequently been a 2022, 2023 Upper Deck All Elite. We call that flagship. And that started with Tops. Tops back in the day when they started doing Tops 2008, 2009, we just referred to those sets as a top flagship set. They used to have an adjunct called Then Now Forever. That was always part of what we called flagship. So it starts off with the inaugural flagship. Talk about that set. You remember when the 9 card sheet came out before
Hmm.
the set? You know, that was a big deal. First time I saw those, and we were seeing Cody on there, we were seeing CM Punk on there, and people were still chanting for CM Punk at every WWE show back then.
Hmm.
So when they did that, that was quite something.
Absolutely. So I'll touch on a couple of things. I'll try to intersperse. So just to help
Sure.
out with this, I'll try to intersperse the actual company with the cards because
Perfect.
I actually think ironically the cards and the company kind of went in two opposite directions.
Oh,
I'll
really?
explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
This is just
Yeah.
my opinion, but I'll share with you why. So what's funny, and just a quick aside, when Cody and Punk left, ironically, I enjoyed the product more.
Oh,
I
really?
really got I was sick of Cody Rhodes, and I actually don't enjoy him at all. And I've watched some of his WWE stuff, and I'm like, no, it's the same Cody Rhodes. This is the
Yeah.
Cody Rhodes I didn't like in AEW, and it's in WWE. That doesn't make it better for me, but it's a personal thing.
Right.
So anyway, so for the cards, first year that comes out, I actually wasn't surprised with what happened because realistically, flagship, and this is something going back to a sports card background. I obviously I collect hockey, and because I collect hockey, I'm very familiar with Upper Deck's offerings and the way they do their thing because it came out with so much hype, and this was the same issue that happened with Prism. It's the same issue that happened with a lot of stuff in WWE. The parallel is there. The problem is that immediately there were a lot of folks who were not familiar with Upper Deck's game, so to speak,
Right.
and they in their minds they had this idea, oh well, it's wrestling, brand new company, and it's going to be super hot. And I think the boxes were pushing $300 or whatever it was. But the problem is it was a flagship product, and if you know anything about a flagship product, especially for Upper Deck, they're not designed for that. You don't get one autograph per box. It's in the odds. It's not like they hid this from you. It's right front and center. And they were literally trying to figure it out because they were trying to come up. The design wasn't just carry over from hockey. They didn't just take the design and bring it over. And they don't have young guns. And the roster, while it was fresh and new, which made it appealing to me, it meant that we ended up with Serpentico. It meant that we ended up with these characters that
Yep.
the mass audience. If you pull a Serpentico autograph, how excited are you?
Right.
Like it's not going to move the needle for you. And even the characters that were built, they were just getting initially going. Like realistically, your biggest characters in your initial would have been like a Cody Rhodes, or it would have been like basically Chris Jericho. You would have been looking for names that you were familiar with, but
From
there weren't a lot of
WWE.
them.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to this as we go through the rest of the sets. A fatal flaw that Upper Deck has, and this isn't their fault. It's just the nature of the way the company's working. 6 years versus 60.
Sure.
There is no legends that you can draw from. You don't have the, I can't go get the $1 million man to sign cards for me to throw it in there. Hey, a little nostalgia for longtime
Right.
wrestling fans.
Right.
I can't do that. I don't have that option. So I've got to go with what I have. So the only legends are basically like a Jake the Snake Roberts, who was a manager,
Right.
Tully Blanchard. Like I've got to go in that direction. I basically have
Right.
to borrow from people that normally I wouldn't be thinking of.
Sure.
So in order to make that work, so suddenly that's off the table, and I've got a bunch of people you don't know who they are. So all of a sudden you open the boxes. Well, Paul, what's your big draw? What's your excitement? The
Sure.
amount of hits are going to be small, and then the box price is way too high because the box was designed to be maybe $100 box
Why do you
at
figure that
most.
was? Was that a conscious effort by Upper Deck to sort
Upper
of
Deck didn't do anything about it. I can tell you that I've had conversations with folks at Upper Deck. They're like, no, we designed the box to be like a $75 to $100 box. That's what it was supposed to be. And the secondary market took it.
right?
So they're sitting there like, they're like, no, you're going to be disappointed. If you pay that price, you are going to be disappointed because it was never designed to be that. And that right there, Paul, was like a poison pill right at the beginning of the life. The very first product is way overpriced. And what
Sure.
you're getting on it doesn't feel remotely close to a value. And they're sitting there like, we did not design it to be at that price point.
Right. And it's good. It's an important point that you touch on because it was new out the gate. And
Mm-hmm.
they did have people like Cody Rhodes and CM Punk, your Darbys and MJFs and Britt Bakers. They weren't established yet. They weren't.
Yes.
They didn't have the meat, if you will, that they would get in subsequent years. Like now we talk about sort of that original crop of guys in AEW that were only AEW guys. We didn't know them before then, and of course MJF went through the roof a couple of years later.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 2021. What's your thoughts on the overall look and feel of that first product? Is that sort of what you would have expected being an Upper Deck guy?
So it was what I expected, but that's why I made that caveat about what when I look at that box. So again, that number is just my recollection based on the general what that kind of thing would have gone for at the time, just from my recollection. But the thing is, looking at that box, I am looking at a box where in Canadian dollars, I shouldn't be paying more than 120 or $150 for that. That's the max. Absolutely.
Right.
Ironically, about where the flagship is today. So today, the flagship is closer to the price point that it should have been right from the beginning, but the hype took it beyond that. So I'm sitting there going like, I opened a handful of boxes, but I'm sitting there like these box prices, even at the time, these box prices are too high. And as a result, it led some people to have to try to charge too much for singles, which was unjustifiable because what happens is as soon as the player collectors get their stuff, the price falls like a stone,
Sure. And that's how
with a
we
few
judge
exceptions.
what's in it, what do we make back,
Yeah,
or is there enough pull, there's enough value, is there enough sting in the box to justify what you're paying? Now, has it been relatively consistent, the pricing over these 6 years or 5 years, whatever it's been?
I think it's fallen quite a bit. The reality is that the majority of the characters now established enough where you can kind of make your call. Some of them are, an MJ, even the MJF stuff, and as we go through more sets, the MJF one, like the novelty is over. He's still an extremely popular character, so
Sure.
you'll still get decent money for him. But it's not like the price point is going to keep dropping because the
Okay.
product itself. That was the first go around. That is easily and far away one of. There is one that I actually like less that is going to be right at the bottom rung of all time AEW products just because of the nature of, well, they had plenty of room to improve. So they started improving as we went along, and that's to be expected. Each flagship has gotten better than the
Right.
previous.
Right. Okay, so that was 2021. That was it really. We had the flagship.
Mm-hmm.
We get into 2022. We start getting the online stuff, the match dated moments and the new arrivals, and that was kind of
Sure.
cool. As they
Yeah.
would get a new performer that hadn't been in the company, they put out those, and they kept those going. Are they still going with those? Like, do we
Mm-hmm.
still get new arrivals this year?
Yeah, there just haven't been as many like brand
Right.
new characters, but I think Tekla was. I think Tekla was this year, and I think there's been a couple of other ones who have, as they've been introduced. Speedball Mike Bailey maybe was this
Yeah.
year. I'm trying to remember if he qualified for that, but there have been a few new characters, and I think, and they've all gotten new arrivals. They've been there.
Now, we also got things, we got the flagship set in 2022, which we just discussed for
Mm-hmm.
2021. It was basically, and we get one every year, we
Mm-hmm.
just discussed that. But then we start getting stuff that's really interesting. We had three others. We had the Spectrum 2021
Mm-hmm.
that came out in 2022. And I put in 2022 because it came late in 2022.
It did, yeah.
The
It
problem,
was supposed to be a 2021 set, but technically it came out in
right,
2022.
and that's a bit of bone of contention for Tony and I. Is a lot of times if
Mm-hmm.
something comes out in October and they call it 2021 and we're in 2022, we're going to checklist it as a 2022 set, and we're just going to
Sure,
call it Spectrum 2021.
sure.
That was a little bit harder to put together. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of the few, that and the Black Diamond,
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't. I think Chuck put it together, but that wasn't a set easily put together from boxes. I think you had to go into
Mhm.
the secondary market, get onto eBay, got
Mhm.
into breaks that were just starting out and getting popular at the time to put that together. But we also had two others. We had Skybox Metal Universe. And I'll be honest with you, Carlos, that's my favorite of all the AEW releases. And the one that came out this year in particular that I didn't even know about it, the National one, it was just around the corner,
Sure.
was one of my favorite all-time AEW sets. But we had the first Skybox Metal Universe, and then we also had a set called Allure. Chat about those a little bit.
Sure. So I think when they went into so Allure Metal Universe, I like. I'm going to touch on those in a second. Spectrum is so. I'm glad you brought up Spectrum because now we're getting into the fun part. Spectrum for me is literally for me personally from a bang for your buck value in terms of concept and everything. It is my least favorite set. It is actually at the bottom rung. It is the bottom of the bottom. Now that doesn't mean there aren't good cards in it. There definitely are. And there are some concepts they tried where which I think worked out pretty well. I've actually got a box here of cards if for some reason we want visual references. But the reality is that I think they tried, but I think what they ended up with is they ended up with a template. And if anybody's ever seen the cards, your base card is there. But if you see what the base card looks like, then you know what the memorabilia card looks like. You know what the autograph memorabilia card looks like. And then you got parallels of them, which look virtually identical with the exception of some foil. And that's basically all you do to just slowly upgrade the set. But it's the same template over and over and
Right.
over. So it gets repetitive
Not that
if you actually
creative.
collect. Yeah, if you collect a character, I did it once for my friends just as a joke. I said I'm going to show you the card, and I literally fanned it out, and every single card looks the same, with the
Yeah.
exception of well, this one's got memorabilia, this one's got an autograph. The autograph's a sticker, so you got a sticker auto with memorabilia. It's just not a very inspiring, and the set is like a gray, and it's not very inspiring at all. Like
Right.
really, it isn't. For the Allure and the Metal Universe, I liked it because obviously they brought in the PMGs, so that's that's always going to be a big draw for folks. So that was good. I still think there's a couple things they could have done better, but they did include some inserts and things that I think were compelling. They were interesting, so that was a good thing. And then they include the retro, which brought back the old PMG design, which a lot of people really appreciated and enjoyed. But it was the chase for the PMGs. That was the big one with that. Allure, the first year Allure, is to me now. Speaking of the ones that I like the least, for me, the first year Allure was the best set so far. Doesn't mean it's had the best characters in it.
I
Doesn't
like
mean
the
that there
look
aren't
of it.
some. Yeah, I like the look.
Specifically
I
the one
like
that
the.
came out last year in 2024. I thought that was a great looking set. I just like the design. I like that full on, here's the performer with their name in big at the bottom
Mhm.
and not a lot of fancy shit in the background. You know what I mean? Like in the
Yeah.
Panini era, we had so many parallels and stuff where sort of the treatment of the graphic design was what kind of neat sort of effect could you get. But I like the allures. And
Mhm.
they were easy to, for me, it's always like, well, how hard is it for me to put the set together? How hard is
Mhm.
it for me to buy the complete insert sets on the secondary market? And I'm a bit of a dinosaur in that way because that's not what the majority of people are doing in the wrestling hobby anymore. But I've always been fond of the look of the Allure, and I like the Skybox Metal because it was like a chrome. You know what I mean? It
Mhm.
was a bit more upper end. We'll get into Black Diamond in a bit, but
Yeah.
I liked the look of that. How did those sets perform?
So for I think overall, once you got into the second and third years, I think a little bit of the bloom had gone off the rose. I think it slowed things down. I think it's a double edged sword. For the collectors, the singles of their favorites will do okay. But it's one of those things where like the boxes will sell. There's still folks that, but some of the boxes will just sit. It
Right.
depends on where you're at. I kind of have fun with it. I know a few dealers that kind of eventually part of the reason I like the first year Allure is my personal favorite because I actually like the design and everything. The second year that you're talking about has like a little more of the comic book thing with the big
Yeah,
letters and
which
everything.
I liked.
I think it's a good design as well. I don't mind it, but it wasn't as much of a favorite for me. But the first one, I felt like they had a little bit of fun with it. They had die cuts. They had a lot of different little patterns and different things. It's a chromium card. We like the chromium cards, and
Yeah.
WWE chromium is huge. So the fact they brought in the chromium, I think, worked really well. The Metal Universe also brought in a little premium feel. So I went and grabbed it from the box. So there's your one of your PMGs.
Yeah, that's a nice.
Yeah. So there's your gold
What,
one of one.
what grade did you get on that?
So that is an 8.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah. So that's the gold one of one. But the thing is, the PMG chase, I think, helped it. I
Hmm.
think one thing that hurt it, and something I can touch on with you later on as we go, is that I don't like having e-packs separated. I don't like having some of the inventory. So like stuff like this was pulled and somebody had it and I was able to bid it up and I purchased it. But then Britt Baker actually has 3 PMGs. So she's got the base, there's the high number, and then there's the retro. Well, this one's the high number. So the other ones I haven't seen yet. So and it's been years now since that product's been released. So
Why did they just not come to market?
They have, not that I'm aware of.
You've just so they've ended up on shelves and that's where they stay.
Or they're sitting in a box right now. I can tell you that literally 2 months ago, one of the main features from 22 flagship.
Right.
So the insert, the main features, the one of one for Britt Baker, only just got pulled a couple of months ago, and I purchased it on eBay.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's from
I
2022.
guess the
So
competition for this stuff isn't quite as fierce as it would be for a lot of the bigger names in the WWE product. But the market is there. Like there are guys like you out there,
mhm.
and I've chatted with many of them over the years that prefer the AEW product. It's just like you say, the ratio isn't quite the same, and they just
Yeah.
don't get the same amount of attention. All right,
Mhm.
well, let's move on to 2023. Again, we had new arrivals and match dated moments, which are the EPAC
Mhm.
stuff, the online stuff. Um, and then we had flagship, and that was about it for 2023. Now, an interesting thing I made a note of is that we had the match dated moments and then we had the match dated moments special edition.
Mhm.
What were the differences in those two online releases?
So the match dated moments special edition. I have to think about that one. I think the match dated moments. I feel like there were parallels.
Were
So the
they?
match dated moments was online. So you went and we went there and you would get it from that. Effectively, you would buy digital packs. They were all physical cards, but you would buy digital packs, and then they would have your base version of it, and then you could get a couple of different parallels. So maybe that's what you're referring to by special edition. I'd have to see the card, but I
Well,
think that's what I'm
yeah,
thinking of.
because we've got them checklisted separately, and what we'll
Okay,
have to do is go take
which
a
is
look at them.
fine, but I think they were parallels. If you showed me what they look like, I
But
could answer that question.
same names on the cards.
Yeah, but you'd have to show me what the card looked like. But I'm pretty sure you're talking about a parallel.
Okay. And yeah, that was it that we have marked for
Yeah,
2023. The
because there
flag.
were a lot of delays. They kept pushing it forward in
Right,
time. Yeah,
right. And again, 23 flagship, if I recall, came out very late in the year again.
they all. It's become a running joke.
Has
And
it?
like I said,
Okay.
I have had some associations. I've got some friends at Upper Deck, and trust me, they get my feedback. I give them a hard time, and every single one of them, I just say, so whatever the 2025 set. Oh, is it coming out in 2027? Is that when we're actually getting it? I
Yeah,
give them a hard time. Believe me.
yeah, good. Well, I'm glad that they're getting feedback that they're hearing
Yes.
from actual
Mhm.
collectors because
Yes.
we don't have, like we've been at this for a bit, but we don't have a direct line to anybody at Upper Deck specifically
Mhm.
for this product, and we'd
Yeah.
love to talk to Billy, and we may
Yeah.
have spoken to him
Yeah.
early in the game if I
Yeah.
recall
So that
correctly.
Billy you're referring to, Billy, I have him. I have him on this, and we chat back and forth. By the way, he's also a collector. So just to be clear, like it's they. I always want to be clear on this. There are people at these companies, and the thing is, they do hear feedback because he doesn't hide. To your point, the reason why that you don't always see those folks is that there's like a rotation. Sometimes he'll go to like he was at the All In. So he'll go to some of the events and they've got like an upper deck booth and they'll represent at those
I see.
locations. He's been to the expo in Toronto a number of times. But he can't go to all of them. So it's one of those things where it's almost like a rotation. So the problem is if I send somebody who is an upper deck representative who does a bunch of sets, but they don't specifically do the AEW, they will not be answered to be able to answer your questions to your
Right.
satisfaction
That's
because there's only
interesting.
so many people working on it.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned Sport Expo because
Yeah.
I'm up here as well. I go,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
pretty much all of them, walk around.
Yeah.
For years and years, I was walking around asking people about wrestling. They thought it was insane.
Mm-hmm.
But slowly, sort of, we've grown into our own. But I have no idea that your friend Billy was up here because I'd love to chat with
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
and say, look,
I've sat down, I've had dinner with him. We've had some good long conversations. Like he's a good guy. It's one of
because
those things. Like they're nice folks.
we're on our own niche, but like my site, the Wrestling Card Price Guide, gets like 250 unique visitors a day from around the world. So
Sure.
people are checking us out, and
Mm-hmm.
we've checklisted, as has Wrestling Trading Cards, all the WrestlingTradingCards.com. We've got all the AEW stuff there, and in the shows that we do, whether it's our hot topics or monthly recaps, we always make a point of mentioning AEW.
Mm-hmm.
But for a while there, like even at the national on one of our panels, one of our associates, I guess you call him, kind of ripped on
Oh,
AEW.
I heard it. I heard that panel. I know.
Yeah, you remember that when
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, you
I got a
know,
kick out of it.
yeah,
I was
well,
amused.
like a lot of people was, oh, he shouldn't have said that, and I'm like, well, he's right. You know, what he said was, maybe not the right place for it, but I'll let other people decide that. But to be honest with you, it was just a product of frustration, I think, because we're all rooting for Upper Deck to succeed with this stuff, and AEW isn't going anywhere. I mean, the promotion itself seems to be doing very well. There was a lot of talk in the last couple of years about their attendance being down and stuff, but
Mhm.
it seems to me that it's still a vital ongoing concern as a promotion,
Yeah.
so
We talked about it a little earlier, just to give a quick context for this. So like I said, the criticism I think was fair. And again, I don't work for Upper Deck, so it's not on me. And trust me, I will give them a hard time and tease them when they do things that I think are ridiculous. So I'm happy to do that. But the thing is, like when he went off on that, the reality is I don't think that moved the needle anywhere, in California. And like
Probably wasn't
go
even
ahead,
seen, right?
I'm sure they saw it, but the reality is, do you have any idea how many? Just to put it in context, Paul. Like I said, Billy and those other guys, a lot of them do multiple licenses in different categories. It's not just
Mul-
wrestling.
Multiple
There's also the
sports.
hockey. Hockey is still the biggest thing that
Sure.
they do
Yeah.
at this point. So,
Yeah.
like for example, the Cup is going to be coming out pretty soon. That is the biggest hockey set they do in the calendar year. Well, Billy was involved in that. So, for example, he's doing the rounds and talking about that, but he's been accessible. And funny enough, a lot of people may not realize this. There are Facebook forums where people collect AEW cards. He's around.
Okay.
He
And
he's he so he sees things, he hears things, he does
okay.
listen, but at the same time, he's not like going to sit there and go like, "Oh yeah, go ahead and yell at me."
Well, hopefully he sees this episode that we're doing, and maybe he
I'll
reaches.
direct him to it. I'll direct
Yeah,
him
he
to it.
reaches out to Tony and I, and we'll have him on, and we can go at him directly because there was a fella, Lucas at Panini, that came on with Tony and I, and he was
Mhm.
wonderful. He gave us a
Yeah.
lot of background information, and our audience likes to hear this kind of stuff because these are the guys making the decisions. These are the guys that are moving the product forward.
Mhm.
So it's important to us to not just sort of talk in a vacuum and say, hey, these are our opinions, because a lot
Mhm.
of times, it's important for me to meet someone like you that's really invested in the product and has the knowledge because, we cover a lot of ground. I'm into vintage, I'm into tops, I'm into all of it. So it's hard for me to, master of trades, or what's the saying,
Jack of all trades, master of none.
master of none. Like
Mhm.
I,
Yeah.
I have a cursory knowledge of all of it going back to day one.
Yeah.
But I don't specialize in AEW particularly other than buying the sets,
Mhm.
and putting them together and just talking about, again, at a very cursory level, what's going on with the product. So
Mhm.
this is, and thank you again for reaching out to us and saying, hey,
Sure.
you want more background information on AEW. I've been there since
Mhm.
day one, and I can fill in some of the holes for you. But yeah, absolutely. If your buddy's watching, Billy is his name, right?
Yeah,
And
Billy.
we might
Mhm.
have spoke to him several years ago. We've done a lot of shows.
Yeah.
But I'd love to have him on just to sort of get a more up-to-date sort of version for our audience of what's going on. All right, so
Sure.
that was 2023. Like you say, there
Mhm.
was a lot going on. Then we get into 2024. We had obviously the flagship. We had
Mhm.
the last year's Allure set. Again, the new arrivals and the match data moments. But let's talk about Black Diamond. I guess that
Mhm.
would be sort of the highest end set. I don't know
Mhm.
if it would equate to a Transcendent in tops, but it
No,
was the kind of
not
thing.
anywhere, not anywhere near that high. They
But
did,
it's
they did.
still for their product, it was sort of like you're not going to put together a Black Diamond base set,
Mhm. Yeah, well,
or are
not
you?
not easily, not for boxes, no, certainly
Yeah.
not. So I agreed. From their perspective, it was the highest end product, and I had a lot of fun with that one because as soon as I saw it, the funny thing about this stuff, Paul, is that again, going from sports cars, going from understanding how Upper Deck does their business in terms of that, I was like, oh, this is going to be very entertaining and horrific. And by that I mean I think the cards are very nice. Again, going back, I've got a whole section of this box over here that's got a bunch of Black Diamond cards that I've collected. The singles I like, but it's such an expensive product. And regardless, that's why I said earlier you were talking about the parallels. I think the sets have progressively gotten better because I actually think they've done a progressively better job incorporating the feedback. But the lag time between right now they're working on, if somebody is working on something right now, we're talking about late 2026, 2027 products are being considered and worked on now as we speak. So the lag time is basically a year.
Why is that? That's not the same case with Topps or Panini. Like Panini, especially towards the end, were cranking. Once they knew the license was expiring, we were getting stuff like we were overwhelmed with the stuff last year. The last 6 months of 2024 was insane with the amount of Panini product we were getting. So is it a physical problem of them being able to print and go from sort of start to finish with the product, or why do you figure that is? Why does
Combination.
it take so
So
long for them to get their sets to market?
So consider the size, consider the amount of licenses that Panini has,
Okay.
consider the scale of operation they have. A lot of people think of Upper Deck and they think about the heyday of Upper Deck when Upper Deck had baseball, they had football, they had basketball, they had
They're
everything.
a smaller company now, I get
I
that.
was going to say, look at the amount of licenses today compared to back then. Panini was closer to running on all cylinders because they had football, they had basketball, they had all these different licenses. That's one thing. Number two, as soon as you're a bigger company, you have easier, more priority access to printers.
Yeah.
This is something they won't say, but I'm inferring just from logic because I'm looking at if I'm a printer and I've got Topps Fanatics here offering me a ton of money to be like, you put me in the front of the line, and I've got Panini here who can offer me pretty good money to put me right behind them at the front of the line. Well, Upper Deck is taking up the rear.
Right.
realistically. And this is me. This is
And
not coming from them.
Fanatics down in Texas owns the biggest printers now. I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
Yeah. And again, this is coming from
notwithstanding that
me.
they own everything, but
Yeah. Yeah.
they have obviously that first in line sort of advantage, right?
Yeah. And like I said, this is coming from me. This is not something they will ever say or talk about because
Yeah, that's
again,
insider
why
stuff.
would they admit that? Why would they? And they wouldn't admit it to me. They wouldn't admit it to anybody else. This is my opinion based on just using common sense and looking at the way things have gone over years
Well,
now.
it does make
You know,
sense.
Upper Deck always, it's not just wrestling sets. Hockey sets are also backed up. And that's their biggest license. So
Right.
Paul, if they can't get the hockey sets to come out on time, all the time consistently, and that's their biggest license, do you think that something that falls below their biggest license
Right.
will get priority?
Right. And it's not like Tops is like clockwork. You know, they have their
Yeah.
delays as
And
well.
they've
In
got
case
their
something
struggles too.
comes, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Of course.
Yeah.
But it just seemed that it became a never-ending story for
Mhm.
2 or 3 years in there that what's
Yeah.
going on with Upper Deck and AEW,
Yeah.
it seems
Yeah.
like they're
Yeah.
lagging. And then you just
So,
say that.
Paul, let me assure you, the hockey people had the exact same conversation, the same complaints, and
Okay.
they were getting it from all sides. It is not just AEW, it is
Very
hockey, it
interesting.
is everything else they're doing.
Well, now I can appreciate it a bit more and be a little
Yeah.
more open-minded to it because again,
Mhm.
we're just here sitting, looking at the overall wrestling card hobby, and we're
Mhm.
saying, you know, we're comparing.
Yeah.
We think apples to apples, but sometimes we're not. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes.
There was a version of the cup, just to give you guys context. There was a version of the cup, which again is the highest tier, most expensive hockey product that's released in the calendar. A couple of the versions of the cup, Paul, were 2 years behind.
Really, and
Yeah, like
that's their premier product.
that is the ultimate premier product.
Yeah,
So only now, and this has been years since pandemic period, only now, Paul, the current version of the cup, they've almost caught up.
really.
It's been years, the years of getting, and this is their highest end product. This product right now is pre-selling for $1,500 US.
Wow.
This is not a small product, Paul.
And
You would think that that would automatically mean, oh, this is always going to be on. No, Paul, it has been late every single year.
really, huh.
Yes,
I guess that just speaks to the sort of mechanics or the economics
yes,
of the industry and how it
yeah,
works. And again, we're kind of on the outside looking in.
yeah,
It's like when I was younger, I used to make CDs and cassettes for bands, but they were mostly independent bands.
mm,
And I wouldn't have a clue about what happened in the record business because I was with the people on the outside trying to get into the record business. You know,
mm,
that's what my perspective was.
sure,
So yeah, 2024 Match Day Moments again, flagship. Before we get off these years, is there
yeah.
anything on the flagships from 21, 22, 23, 24 that you liked more, or were they all basically the same kind of treatment?
Mhm. Well, I think every year, so for flagship, every year I do think so. My opinion was, and I've talked about this on my channel. Every year, I think they progressively improved it. Year one, like I said, was very much the most basic. Mistakes were made in terms of keeping it relatively limited. I
Right.
don't have a problem as much as some people do about the one autograph per box thing. And the reason my argument for it, and again, just so that lest anyone accuse me, I'm never going to be an upper deck apologist. That is not my job.
Sure.
Again, they don't pay me for that. If they
Yeah.
pay me, Paul, then I'll consider being an
Yeah.
apologist.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, if the check clears, that's fine. But they're not. But as it is today, but I will use a little bit of. That's why I gave you guys the hockey analogy. That is their biggest license. And if the hockey one is delayed, and I don't take my word for it, feel free to go look at hockey card forums and look at the list of complaints that they've had over years about every single release being delayed.
Oh, it's the same deal.
100%. So it's not what. So it's not AEW is not being picked on in particular.
Okay.
They are the same as everybody else in this regard. And again, they're going to be on the second tier of licenses for Upper Deck just by the nature of it, the size of the market.
Size, right.
So every flagship, I think they've improved. They've taken little pieces. They've taken some feedback, added some things. I think the photography in number two was better. I think some of the inserts in number two were better. They did a better job with it. I appreciated, but the autographs, keeping them a little bit more limited in some ways was helpful to at least keep the price from absolutely collapsing. Because again, I like to pick on them, but if you pull a Serpentico autograph, I don't care. Like putting more of them in a box isn't going to make us more excited, Paul. You may as well put one Serpentico autograph per box to
Yeah.
satisfy these people, but it's going to be a $1 card. Why do you need this so badly? So
Yeah.
just having more autographs for the sake of having autographs isn't necessarily a thing, but I understand the idea. But I think the box prices should have been lower. If the box price had been lower, I think the expectation would have been more tempered, and then more people could have focused on collecting the set, collecting some of the parallels, collecting some of the inserts, put the focus there. They've tried to put more technology in there, maybe overdoing the lenticulars a little bit,
Okay.
but at least I appreciate they're trying to do non-autograph inserts to try to give people different things to chase.
Well, you know what? I particularly like some of the inserts. Like there was
Yeah.
one called the merch, which were die cut, were kind
Mhm.
of look like t-shirts I liked. There was
Yeah.
the ice cream ones, like that looked like an ice cream bar that was kind of
Oh, I gave Billy a hard time about that one.
I didn't mind those, because
I understand some people
that was
didn't,
something a
but
little different that we didn't see every day.
I get it. I totally
The
get it.
playing card set, which were a bear to put
Playing cards I
together.
like. Playing cards I
The
like.
playing cards I liked.
Mhm.
Um, and some of the other ones, and there's been quite a few of them, have been very dazzling, very
Mhm.
colorful. Like I've
Sure.
had no problem with the product itself at all,
Mhm.
and just between me and you, well, I've put this out there before, like the
Mhm.
current top stuff, the chrome stuff that we've gotten this year, the Cactus Jack and the latest Finest. I'm not a big fan of the way that stuff looks like. It's a little
Yeah.
dark. It's not colorful enough.
Yeah.
They've overdone it on the chrome. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like Panini really showed what could be done if you really wanted to blow things wide open. But you know what?
Yeah.
The
And
upper deck
speaking of
is
delays, by the way, speaking of tops with all their power, they haven't been cranking out sets lately since they've gotten the license back.
no, it's everything up until this Bape one that just came out, which was a
Mhm.
cross promotional thing, has
Yeah.
been the Chrome product.
Mhm.
Whereas the old school, you remember we used to get with Panini the odd NXT set that
Mhm.
was affordable. We used to say the for kids set because this hobby isn't for kids anymore. Like
Mhm.
it costs a lot. Like I spent an arm and a leg putting together Immaculate and Impeccable and National Treasures and doing those base sets. You're paying 30, $40 US a card on a
Mhm.
high card set. I imagine that Black Diamond would have been maybe not as high tier as that, but kind of similar because I was looking at the prices. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do what I
Yeah,
need
exactly.
to do.
So real quick, since we were going in that order, just bring us back around.
Sure.
So Black Diamond, I anticipated the biggest challenge they were going to have is that the box price was so high. So I promise all that talking meandering got us to this point. I promise there's a purpose to this. So the Black Diamond one, I knew it was going to be too high. And by
Yeah.
that I mean like I was going to open a couple boxes anyway because of course I look for my channel I want to be able to talk about them intelligently. I want to see the cards in my hand, look at them, and be able to tell you, okay, so this is what I like, this is what I don't like. I give my critiques that way.
Right.
But they're way too expensive. The boxes were just too high, and I was able to, as it started collecting dust, because here's the problem: even if the cards are nice, if the price point is too high, a lot of people are going to be like, I can't. Not for that price. Like this is how much it is per card. And then what if I get a dud box?
Right.
I got possibly one of the worst boxes that you could get a Black Diamond ever. It was the first box that I opened on my channel, and I literally just I titled it with the Black Diamond set, and I just said that was a box.
Yeah.
That was it. That's all I could say about it. It was a box,
And,
and it
and
was
and remember too,
atrocious.
people are often buying both. They're buying
Yeah,
the WWE product. They're buying.
yeah,
I'm in a group called the Brotherhood, which focuses on independent stuff. And these guys are buying all of it. They're
yeah,
buying the AEW product, they're buying the
yeah.
WWE, they're buying the indie stuff, and it gets real expensive real fast.
Mm-hmm.
When you're
Yeah.
doing it, like I have to buy on the secondary market because I just don't make bank
Mm-hmm.
pulling anything out of boxes. But I understand the thrill of breaking, and that's what the hobby is. Of course,
Yeah.
it's changed now with the whatnots of the world and sort of the structure and fanatics and all that stuff. And that's a whole, we've done shows on that as to how the product comes to market, how that's all changed. Um, but it's fantastic talking to you about AEW in particular because again, it's been a vital part of the mix, in my opinion, despite the fact that maybe we were less than kind to it along the way and we shouldn't have been.
Mm-hmm.
And to AEW, I apologize on, as one of the commentators of this stuff, that maybe we should have been a little more aware of what's going on behind the scenes and why there were delays and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Although I do suggest that if you're at the National, the biggest show of the year, and you got two guys that are wrestling guys that come up to you asking about wrestling product, you should have someone there that has at least an inkling of what's going on with it.
I think it's fair. I think it's a reasonable critique. One thing I would add, though, also kind of in the same vein, that kind of plays into you talking about the singles. I think it became a chicken or the egg thing. Once the price point started off so high, and the irony is that, like I said, I did a video where I specifically predicted this
Right.
before the release even happened. I said, when this comes out, the price point is going to be so high. Not enough boxes are going to get opened that are going to get the singles in the marketplace. So as a result, even a collector like myself, who is pretty good at chasing this stuff and reaching out to some people, say, "Hey, have you pulled this? Do you have this?" I've still got a bunch of stuff. I've got a ton of stuff from that set, but I've also got a bunch of stuff on there that I hasn't seen the light of day. I know it exists, but at the same time, now the ultimate problem is that then you've got sets like that, then you'll put them out on e-pack. So now I'm sitting there waiting for people to chase e-pack achievements, pull those cards that I've been wanting this whole, but the momentum is gone. My last
Right.
video, so the video that I did kind of in response to your guys, quarterly, I said, when you do the e-pack thing, by the time e-pack comes out, yes, the cards that I'm looking for are going to probably be there. There's a good
Right.
chance some of those really big chases are going to be there. The momentum's gone. So if the
And
person
there's
wanted to
another
get
set
top
is
dollar
coming.
for it, it's done.
Yeah, another set has come out. So,
Yeah, multiple
it's like
sets in some
it's
cases.
like for me, I can't go back chasing stuff that I've missed from 2 years ago because
Yeah,
I have to stay current with it or else I'll fall way behind. You
yeah,
just won't be able to keep it up, you know.
yeah.
Before I let you go, let's talk about what your prognosis is for the future of AEW as a promotion and the Upper Deck license, and where you see it all going. Is it going to carry on the way it's been, or is there anything else you can add there that you think might be interesting?
Sure. So promotion wise, I think Khan has turned the corner a little bit. Now that doesn't mean he's doing flawless things. He's not. I do think there's certain proclivities he has as a promoter, like as a person. He is very clearly a wrestling fan.
Sure.
But also as a result, he's a wrestling fan. I've been around a long time with that stuff too, where people fantasy book. Well,
Right.
imagine a billionaire's son who gets the fantasy book. He gets his own promotion to do whatever
Yeah.
he wants, and that's good and bad. It's good in the sense that he's very passionate. It's bad in the sense that he has a fixated obsession with New Japan and certain specific. He wants, and I'm sitting there like, this works in doses.
I
If
see.
you beat me over the head with it, and again, this is a longtime wrestling fan, like I can appreciate it, but I don't need 5 hour pay-per-views. A little bit of restraint would be helpful. Or do like what happened with the All Out in Toronto.
Right.
Started earlier
Right.
because that would
Right.
because
Right.
that I think the beginning of the pre-show and everything was like 3 o'clock or thereabouts. I was at that show with a buddy of mine, so the start time was much more reasonable for us. It was wonderful, but it's still too damn long. The show's too long, but at the same time, you feel like you're getting more your money's worth though. So
Well,
like
wasn't
right
that
now,
wasn't that a reaction to not go head to head with WWE? It's on the same
yeah,
day.
they made the adjustment, but the thing is
Right.
that adjustment worked in their favor. They had a better show, and it ended at a more reasonable time. So
Right.
as the audience, we actually got a chance to have a good show, and we got to leave at a reasonable time.
Yes.
You've been around downtown Toronto. It's miserable when you're trying to leave late. So heaven forbid it ends at a reasonable time, which allows me to go get dinner, and
Yeah.
then I can go home at a nice leisurely pace.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful. I appreciated it
I'm
greatly.
15 minutes away from downtown, so I know.
Yeah.
I go
Yeah.
downtown.
So I appreciated it greatly. For me, it was great because it actually I made a day out of it. So
Right.
it was great from that perspective. So there's things they're doing that are really good. And they for all the criticism they receive about not having storylines, no, they actually do. And lately they've had some better ones. They've also had some clunkers, but we just came off Survivor Series. I didn't watch it, but I just watched little highlights of it. That's not being received super well. So WWE, ironically,
I actually will watch it
WWE is
tonight.
dropping every ball they can possibly find, and literally all Tony Khan has to do is just make some adjustments and then stay the course. And he actually benefits just by comparison because they produced war games, their blood and guts on free TV,
Right.
and it was a better show, and people liked the show. And now you're comparing it to the one where you charged 45,000 people an inordinate amount of money, and they're booing the main event,
Right.
and you paid top dollar for this.
Yeah, I
So
get it.
all you have to do is just put on fix some of the rough edges. So from a promotional standpoint, I like some of the stuff they're doing.
The Khan's
I
not
go
going to
to
run
all the
out of
shows.
money. So as far as you're aware, they're in it for the long haul, right? They're not going to one day decide,
He's a multi-billionaire. They own the Jacksonville Jaguars.
yeah, I understand that. So they're
Yeah.
not going to wake up one morning and say, you know what, this isn't meeting our sort of bottom line expectations.
Only if Tony gets bored and only if the network decides to pull it off the air. But the thing is, based on today's thing, WWE ratings have been going down for years.
Right. Yeah.
They had a little renaissance, and they were very happy to
Yeah,
tout it, but then it's gone right back down. It started
yeah,
to slide right back down.
there's been a lot of chirping about WWE product lately,
Yeah,
specifically about how it's being booked. And again,
yeah,
I try not to get into the storylines and
yeah,
equating that. To me, the hobby is one thing, and I like to talk about the cards in and of themselves and how
yeah.
they relate to the overall hobby and everything that's come before
Mhm.
it and what the collectors and dudes like us
Yeah,
are expecting out of it.
yeah.
And I let the internet wrestling community uh, go off ad infinitum about what
Yeah.
they like and don't like
No, I
about
agree.
it.
But the only reason I bring it up, and believe me, the only reason I bring it up, because if I wanted to go full Homer, I could have been wearing the hat. I could
Yeah,
have gone
I
full
got you.
Homer. I had
Yeah,
the option.
yeah,
But the only reason I bring it up, though, is that the perception of the product does matter. So, going back to your point from earlier, when Panini was doing it, they were doing a great job. I'll be the first to tell you they're doing a great job. And I collect one WWE person just to keep it interesting for myself, just to have something to collect from there. And I think they did a great job with a lot of the products. But here's the thing: WWE, for all its flaws, is tremendous at marketing.
sure.
WWE is amazing at marketing. There is no stone that will be left unturned to promote the hell out of the product.
Yeah.
In that last video that I did around the same time as your quarterly, I said I specifically did a video talking about the marketing, AW slash Upper Deck marketing. Well, AW doesn't have the same mechanisms in place to do that.
I see.
So they can't market it. And they're also the number 2 promotion. So they don't have the built-in gigantic fan base that they can pull from. They're trying to build it a little bit and going internationally and all that. That's helping. But they don't have those horses to be able to push behind it. And Upper Deck doesn't seem to have those horses either. Right. So you've got 2 different companies who don't necessarily have the ability.
Even Panini didn't. I mean, we really saw a change with Fanatics and Topps this year where they really started putting.
But Panini did have Panini did have WB, because WB was invested in making sure that whatever they do still does well. So they were still willing to help promote it.
Insofar as the on-screen promotion during Raw of the product.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
And that's massive. That brings in a whole new tier of casual collectors that are like, oh, I like the product, I'm going to buy. Maybe not, to the level that we would. Certainly not to the level that the guys like us would. But over time, some of these guys become us. They start collecting, and the next thing you know, a few years pass, they have a lot of cards, and now they're into it. And that's what the hobby has become. We've seen it grow kind of through osmosis, like ground roots, and it achieves critical mass by people enjoying the collectibles. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, but Panini was in a much stronger position brand wise. Yeah. That's why I say a lot of times when people think about Upper Deck, and this is just size, I say with much love to my friends that are there at Upper Deck. We're thinking about them as a legacy brand. People are looking back at their heyday when they had all these licenses. That isn't today. They're not the same Upper Deck that was back then. Richard McWilliams has died. It's the family trust that owns that company. It's not the same. Richard McWilliams was willing to go to great extents, and he had the Michael Jordan exclusive was signed during his tenure. All the Tiger Woods exclusive, all this stuff they were doing was under his tenure. He passed away years ago, and it's like owned by like a family trust. The company, it's not like it's not a mom and pop shop, but it's still kind of a family-owned company. Yeah. So there are certain limitations. Yeah. But even Panini was in a much stronger position brand-wise because they had so much success with Prism brand on all these other things.
Yes.
WB Prism automatically already gets a bit of a boost.
And it translated immediately. We saw that.
Yes, exactly.
As soon as that came to market, all of a sudden we got $100,000 black.
Exactly.
And that's
correct.
Listen, my brother, we could talk forever on this, but I'm going to cut us off there just because we're going to start putting people to sleep if we keep going. Before I let you go, why don't you tell everyone about your show and your coordinates on Instagram, and if you're on Twitter and all that stuff, so where people can find you?
Sure. So right now I put it in I don't know if it'll appear in the thing, but I put it in there. It's because I'm a Carlos. So that's Instagram. It's a mix. I will put my wrestling stuff on there, but I also put my sports card stuff on there. But the YouTube is easier. It's BIC Wrestling. It's a play off of, because I've got a YouTube channel with that name specifically, where that's more sports cards and everything. That's the bigger channel, but the other one is an offshoot. But that one is where despite tonight, I don't talk about the storylines and anything very much. I'll touch on it once in a while, but I do think it's relevant because I think if the company's healthy and strong, that actually translates over into the card product a little bit. Sure. So it's not irrelevant. I can't ignore it, but it's not the main focus. The main focus is on the cards themselves. If I like them or I don't like them, what I see in terms of that, and what I think is going to happen with them.
Listen, brother, thanks again. Really appreciate you coming on. Paul and Anand, Carlos Alcazar, AEW expert. This is the Collector Series. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you soon.